Get that rookie out of here immediately! Chief Martinez barked into his radio, his weathered face glistening with sweat as the sirens wailed through the Denver morning air. I don't need some fresh-faced kid getting in the way during this chemical plant emergency. The massive fire truck roared through the industrial district, its red and white lights cutting through the acrid smoke that had begun to blanket the horizon like a malevolent shroud. Behind them, a convoy of emergency vehicles followed, ambulances, hazmat units, and police cars, all racing toward what would become the most challenging rescue operation in the Denver Fire Department's recent history. Chief Martinez, a 30-year veteran whose steel-gray mustache had witnessed everything from high-rise infernos to collapsed highway overpasses, gripped the radio tighter as reports crackled through the static. Multiple explosions reported at ChemCorp Industries. Unknown casualties. Hazardous materials confirmed. Structural integrity compromised in sections B and C. This is a code red emergency. All available units respond immediately. His steel-gray eyes, etched with lines earned through 3 decades of life-and-death decisions, reflected the urgency of the situation as he mentally cataloged the resources they'd need. This wasn't just another industrial fire. This was the kind of disaster that could define careers, save lives, or destroy them entirely. The kind of emergency that separated competent firefighters from legends and exposed weaknesses in even the most experienced departments. The radio crackled again with updates from the scene. Command, this is Unit 12 on site. We've got massive structural damage to the main processing building. Chemical smoke plumes are spreading east toward the residential district. We need immediate evacuation protocols for the surrounding neighborhoods. Martinez felt his jaw tighten. ChemCorp Industries wasn't just another factory. It was a sprawling complex that processed industrial chemicals for construction companies across the Rocky Mountain region. The facility employed over 200 workers across 3 shifts, and a Tuesday morning explosion meant they were dealing with nearly full staffing levels during peak production hours. In the back of Engine 19, rookie firefighter Elena Rodriguez sat quietly among her fellow crew members, methodically adjusting her helmet and checking her oxygen tank for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. At 24, she'd been with the department for only 8 months, still carrying the designation that marked her as the newest member of Station 19's crew. Her conversation with Ahmed revealed crucial information about facility systems that the external rescue teams couldn't have accessed otherwise. Ahmed, as a maintenance supervisor, you understand the building's infrastructure better than anyone outside. Can you tell me about the structural integrity of your area and any alternative access routes that might not be shown on our external diagrams? Ahmed's response provided exactly the kind of insider knowledge that could make the difference between successful evacuation and disaster. Elena, the main corridors are blocked by debris, but there's a maintenance tunnel system that connects our section to the eastern emergency exits. The tunnels weren't damaged because they're below the explosion level, but I'm worried about air quality in the tunnels. Elena's engineering background immediately recognized the significance of this information while also understanding the associated risks. She switched to English to brief Dr. Kim and the rescue teams. We've identified an alternative evacuation route through underground maintenance tunnels that could bypass the most chemically contaminated areas. However, we need immediate air quality assessment of those tunnels before we can authorize their use. Dr. Kim consulted her environmental monitoring equipment, cross-referencing Ahmed's description with the facility's architectural plans. Elena, if those tunnels are below the explosion level and connected to eastern exits, they could provide much safer evacuation routes than surface-level passage through contaminated areas. But you're right about needing air quality confirmation. Elena returned to her Arabic communication with Ahmed. Ahmed, I need you to be very careful, but can you detect any unusual odors or air quality issues in the area near the tunnel access? Don't enter the tunnels, but let me know what you observe from your current location. While coordinating with Ahmed, Elena simultaneously maintained communication with Carlos and his Spanish-speaking group. switching between languages with the fluidity that came from years of multilingual education and professional experience. The complexity of managing technical emergency coordination in multiple languages while integrating facility knowledge from trapped workers represented exactly the kind of crisis management that her academic research had prepared her for, though she had never imagined applying it in such immediate, life-threatening circumstances. Carlos, I need your group to prepare for movement, but don't leave your current area until I give you specific instructions, Elena said in Spanish. We're coordinating with Ahmed's group to identify the safest evacuation routes, and we want to make sure both groups can be evacuated simultaneously for maximum safety. The radio crackled with updates from Rescue Team Alpha. Command, we're observing increased activity from the trapped workers, and the communication coordination is dramatically improving our understanding of internal facility conditions. Request permission to begin positioning for coordinated evacuation using the alternative routes that are being identified. Chief Martinez, who had been monitoring Elena's multilingual coordination with growing amazement, keyed his radio. Alpha Team, you are authorized to begin positioning based on the route information Rodriguez is coordinating. Maintain constant communication with her throughout the positioning process. Elena's confidence continued growing as she found herself fully utilizing her educational background and linguistic abilities for the first time since joining the fire department. The integration of chemical engineering knowledge with multilingual communication skills was solving problems that would have been impossible to address through either capability alone. Dr. Kim approached Elena with additional technical information. Elena, our air quality sensors are showing that the underground tunnel system Ahmed mentioned has significantly lower chemical concentrations than the surface-level areas. If the structural integrity is sound, those tunnels could be our best evacuation option. Elena nodded and returned to her communication with Ahmed. Ahmed, the environmental analysis supports using the tunnel system for evacuation. I need you to carefully assess the tunnel access area from your location. Look for any signs of structural damage, unusual odors, or debris that might block passage. Ahmed's response came after several minutes of careful observation. Elena, the tunnel access appears clear and structurally sound. The air seems much cleaner near the tunnel entrance than in other areas of our section. I believe we can safely access the tunnel system. Elena immediately coordinated this information with Carlos's group. Carlos, we've identified a safe evacuation route through underground maintenance tunnels. Ahmed's group will evacuate first to confirm the route's safety, and then your group will follow with rescue team guidance. The coordination of simultaneous multilingual communication with technical assessment and rescue team positioning represented a level of emergency management complexity that exceeded most standard training scenarios. Elena found herself drawing on every aspect of her education: chemical engineering for technical assessment, linguistics for precise communication, and her research on cross-cultural emergency response for managing coordination between different groups with different cultural approaches to authority and crisis response. Command, this is Rodriguez, Elena reported in English to update the rescue teams. We have confirmed safe evacuation routes through the underground tunnel system. Ahmed's maintenance group will begin evacuation in approximately 10 minutes, followed by Carlos's processing group. All groups understand the safety protocols and are prepared for coordination with rescue teams. Chief Martinez felt a transformation occurring not just in the rescue operation, but in his fundamental understanding of personnel management and resource utilization. Elena's capabilities had been present within his department for 8 months, but organizational assumptions and hierarchical thinking had prevented their recognition and utilization. Rodriguez, outstanding work, Martinez said, his voice carrying genuine admiration mixed with professional recalibration. Continue coordinating the evacuation. You have full authority for technical and communication decisions. As Elena continued managing the complex multilingual coordination, additional complications arose that tested the full range of her capabilities. Radio communication from the facility indicated that a third group of trapped workers had been identified, Portuguese speakers who had been working in a separate area of the facility when the explosion occurred. "Command, this is Rescue Team Beta," crackled through the radio. "We've established contact with additional trapped personnel who appear to be Portuguese speakers. They're in the southern section of the facility, and they seem to be trying to communicate information about facility conditions, but we can't understand their reports." Elena immediately switched to Portuguese, introducing herself and establishing communication with the newly identified group. "Olá, aqui é Helena Rodrigues do Corpo de Bombeiros de Denver. Sou engenheira química e estou coordenando as operações de resgate. Vocês podem me ouvir claramente?" The response came from a woman whose voice carried both relief and urgency. "Sim, obrigada. Meu nome é Maria Santos, supervisora de qualidade. Temos 5 pessoas aqui, uma com ferimento na perna, mas todos podemos andar. As condições químicas aqui estão piorando." Elena's engineering background immediately recognized the significance of Maria's report about worsening chemical conditions. She switched to English to alert Dr. Kim and the rescue teams. "We have a third group of 5 Portuguese speakers in the southern section. Their supervisor reports deteriorating chemical conditions in their area. We need immediate assessment of evacuation priorities." Dr. Kim consulted her monitoring equipment and facility diagrams. "Elena, the southern section is downwind from the primary chemical release. If conditions are deteriorating there, those workers need immediate evacuation priority." Elena returned to Portuguese communication with Maria. "Maria, vocês precisam se preparar para a evacuação imediata. As condições químicas na área de vocês podem se tornar perigosas rapidamente." The complexity of coordinating 3 separate groups speaking different languages while maintaining technical precision and safety protocols was testing even Elena's extensive multilingual and technical abilities. She found herself rapidly switching between Spanish with Carlos's group, Arabic with Ahmed's group, and Portuguese with Maria's group, while simultaneously coordinating in English with rescue teams and chemical specialists. "Carlos, Ahmed, Maria," Elena said, switching between languages to address each group leader. "We're going to coordinate simultaneous evacuation of all 3 groups using different routes based on your locations and current chemical conditions. Stay in communication with me throughout the process." Chief Martinez watched in amazement as Elena orchestrated what had become one of the most complex multilingual rescue operations in the department's history. Her ability to maintain technical precision while switching between 4 languages and coordinating with multiple rescue teams represented capabilities that extended far beyond anything addressed in standard firefighter training. Over the next hour, Elena guided the systematic evacuation of all 3 trapped groups through carefully coordinated routes that took advantage of their insider knowledge of facility systems while minimizing exposure to chemical contamination. Her engineering background allowed her to interpret real-time facility information from the trapped workers, while her linguistic abilities ensured that complex safety instructions were understood and followed precisely. "Command, this is Team Alpha," came the radio report that marked the successful conclusion of the rescue operation. "All trapped personnel have been safely evacuated. 12 individuals total, with minor injuries only. No chemical exposure complications reported. The multilingual coordination was essential for safe evacuation." Elena finally allowed herself to take a deep breath as the last of the rescued workers was transferred to waiting ambulances. Her radio had been active for over an hour of continuous multilingual technical coordination, and her voice was hoarse from the sustained communication effort. Chief Martinez approached Elena with an expression that combined professional gratitude with personal humility. "Rodriguez, what you accomplished today was extraordinary. You didn't just translate languages, you integrated technical knowledge, cultural understanding, and crisis management in ways that literally saved lives. Elena felt the familiar sensation of professional recognition, but tempered with the awareness that her transformation from invisible rookie to essential team member highlighted larger issues about talent recognition and organizational assumptions. Chief, I think what happened today demonstrates that we might not be fully utilizing the diverse capabilities that already exist within our department. Dr. Kim joined their conversation, her scientific interest clearly engaged. Elena, I've coordinated with chemical facilities across multiple states, and what you demonstrated today was exceptional. You combined linguistic precision with technical expertise and cultural sensitivity in ways that exceeded what specialized translation services could have provided. The praise was gratifying, but Elena felt more significant satisfaction from finally being able to integrate her full range of capabilities in meaningful work. 8 months of compartmentalizing her identity, presenting only the aspects that seemed relevant to firefighting while concealing her educational background and linguistic abilities, had ended in a crisis that required exactly the combination of skills she possessed. Chief Martinez, Elena said, I've spent 8 months learning standard firefighting procedures and proving myself through physical performance standards. But today showed me that emergency services in diverse communities require capabilities that extend beyond traditional training parameters. Martinez nodded, his expression reflecting both professional consideration and the beginning of organizational policy reconsideration. Elena, I think we need to fundamentally reassess how we identify and utilize personnel capabilities. What you brought to today's emergency wasn't just helpful, it was essential. And the fact that these capabilities were essentially hidden for 8 months represents a systemic problem in our approach to personnel management. The conversation was interrupted by radio communication from the hospital where the rescued workers were being treated. Command, this is Denver General Emergency. All 12 rescued individuals are stable, with no serious chemical exposure complications. The Portuguese-speaking supervisor specifically requested to thank the firefighter who coordinated their evacuation in their native language. Elena felt a surge of professional satisfaction mixed with emotional gratification. Maria Santos and her colleagues had been safely evacuated, not just because of technical rescue capabilities, but because of communication that had made them feel understood and supported during a crisis situation. Chief, Elena said, I'd like to propose developing systematic protocols for identifying and utilizing linguistic and technical capabilities throughout the department. Today's emergency was successful, but it also exposed gaps in our standard preparation for multilingual crisis situations. Martinez's response reflected both immediate agreement and longer-term strategic thinking. Elena, I want you to take the lead on developing those protocols. But first, we need to discuss your role in this department going forward. Your capabilities clearly extend far beyond standard rookie assignments. 3 days later, Elena Rodriguez walked into Station 19, wearing her firefighter uniform, but carrying additional equipment that reflected her expanded role within the department. Chief Martinez had created a new position for her, Emergency Communication and Technical Specialist, a role that combined her firefighting training with her linguistic abilities and chemical engineering background. The position had been approved rapidly by the city administration, who recognized that Elena's unique combination of capabilities addressed emergency response needs that hadn't been previously acknowledged or planned for. The ChemCorp incident had demonstrated that modern industrial emergencies required personnel who could bridge technical disciplines and cultural differences in ways that traditional emergency training didn't address. Elena's new responsibilities included developing multilingual emergency response protocols, serving as technical liaison for chemical and industrial emergencies, and most importantly, leading an initiative to identify and utilize diverse capabilities among existing department personnel. Her first week in the new role had already produced significant results. A comprehensive skills assessment survey distributed to all department personnel had identified 17 firefighters and paramedics with linguistic capabilities in 12 different languages, 6 personnel with technical backgrounds in fields ranging from electrical engineering to computer science, and multiple individuals with specialized training that could enhance emergency response capabilities. The discoveries were remarkable, not because these capabilities were rare, but because they had been essentially invisible within the department's standard operational framework. Like Elena, many personnel had compartmentalized their professional identities, presenting only the aspects that seemed directly relevant to traditional firefighting duties, while concealing educational backgrounds and specialized skills that could prove valuable during complex emergencies. Elena's office, which had been created from a converted storage room, now contained multilingual emergency protocols, technical reference materials, and communication equipment capable of providing translation and technical consultation services during crisis situations. The walls displayed her chemical engineering degree alongside her firefighting certifications, representing an integrated professional identity that embraced the full range of her capabilities. But more significantly, Elena had become the catalyst for organizational change that extended beyond individual recognition to systematic reform in how the department approached personnel utilization and emergency preparedness. Chief Martinez had implemented policy changes based on Elena's recommendations, including mandatory skills assessment for all personnel, regular cross-training opportunities that allowed firefighters to share specialized knowledge, and revised recruitment strategies that actively sought diverse educational and linguistic backgrounds. The Elena Rodriguez principle, as it had become known within the department, emphasized that organizational effectiveness in modern emergency services required recognizing and utilizing the full spectrum of human capabilities, regardless of how those capabilities might initially appear in traditional job descriptions. On this particular morning, Elena was reviewing multilingual protocol development when her radio crackled with an emergency dispatch. All units respond to industrial accident at Denver International Manufacturing. Multiple casualties reported. Foreign workers involved. Chemical exposure suspected. Elena felt the familiar surge of professional excitement mixed with technical confidence. She grabbed her specialized equipment, multilingual communication devices, chemical assessment tools, and technical reference materials, and headed for Engine 19. Unlike 3 days earlier, when her capabilities had been hidden and her role peripheral, Elena now approached emergency situations with her full professional identity integrated and acknowledged. The transformation from invisible rookie to essential specialist represented not just individual career development, but organizational evolution in recognizing and utilizing human resources. As Engine 19 roared toward the new emergency, Elena reviewed preliminary facility information on her tablet while checking her multilingual communication protocols. Denver International Manufacturing employed workers from 8 different countries and processed chemicals similar to those involved in the ChemCorp incident. What might have been another catastrophic communication failure 3 days earlier was now manageable because the department had learned to recognize, acknowledge, and systematically utilize the diverse capabilities that existed within their own personnel. Chief Martinez's voice came through the radio. "Rodriguez, we're going to need your full range of capabilities on this one. Technical assessment, multilingual coordination, and cultural liaison services." Elena keyed her radio with the confidence that came from professional recognition and organizational support. "Understood, Chief. All systems ready for integrated emergency response." The Denver International Manufacturing emergency unfolded with the coordination that results from proper preparation and systematic capability utilization. Elena established multilingual communication with trapped workers in 5 different languages, provided technical assessment of chemical hazards based on her engineering background, and coordinated rescue operations through the most complex industrial facility evacuation the department had attempted since implementing their new protocols. When the emergency was successfully resolved with no serious casualties, Chief Martinez approached Elena with an expression of professional satisfaction that reflected both individual accomplishment and organizational effectiveness. "Rodriguez, 3 days ago we nearly lost people because we didn't know how to utilize the resources we already had. Today, we saved lives because we learned to recognize and integrate diverse capabilities. That transformation represents more than individual career development. It represents organizational evolution." Elena nodded, packing her specialized equipment while reflecting on the journey from invisible rookie to recognized specialist. "Chief, I think the most important lesson is that organizational effectiveness often depends less on acquiring new resources and more on finally seeing and utilizing the remarkable capabilities that already exist within our personnel." 6 weeks later, Elena Rodriguez was featured in a presentation at the National Fire Chiefs Association annual conference discussing the development and implementation of multilingual emergency response protocols in diverse urban environments. Her presentation, titled "Hidden Resources: Utilizing Diverse Capabilities in Modern Emergency Services," had attracted attention from fire departments across the country. The presentation focused not just on Elena's individual story, but on the systematic changes that had resulted from recognizing and utilizing diverse capabilities within emergency services personnel. The Denver Fire Department had become a model for other departments facing similar challenges in serving increasingly diverse communities with complex emergency response needs. Elena's research and protocol development had expanded beyond the Denver Department to influence emergency response policy at state and national levels. Her work had demonstrated that effective emergency services in modern diverse communities required systematic approaches to identifying and utilizing personnel capabilities that extended beyond traditional training parameters. But perhaps most significantly, Elena's transformation from invisible rookie to recognized specialist had established a new standard for talent recognition and personnel utilization that was being implemented by emergency services organizations throughout the region. The presentation concluded with a simple but powerful principle that had emerged from Elena's experience. The most valuable resources an organization possesses might be the talents it has never thought to look for in the people it already employs. As Elena finished her presentation to the assembled fire chiefs, she reflected on the journey that had brought her from pushing a cleaning cart through hotel corridors. Wait, that was someone else's story. Her journey had taken her from organizing equipment in the background of emergency operations to leading multilingual technical coordination in complex industrial rescues. The ChemCorp incident had lasted only a few hours, but its impact had transformed not just Elena's career, but the entire department's approach to personnel recognition and emergency preparedness. What had begun as a crisis communication failure had evolved into systematic organizational change that would benefit countless future emergency operations. Elena's story represented more than individual professional development. It demonstrated that organizational effectiveness often depended on finally seeing and valuing people for the full range of capabilities they possessed, rather than limiting recognition to the narrow aspects that fit traditional job descriptions. The fire truck disappeared into the Denver sunset, carrying Elena Rodriguez back to Station 19, where her transformation from invisible rookie to essential specialist had redefined not just her own career, but the entire department's understanding of human resource utilization and emergency response effectiveness. Her experience had proven that extraordinary capabilities often existed within ordinary titles, waiting for the right circumstances and organizational recognition to finally become visible and valuable. Most importantly, Elena Rodriguez had established a new principle for modern emergency services: that the difference between good and exceptional organizational performance often lay not in hiring new expertise, but in finally recognizing and utilizing the remarkable talents that had been present all along, hidden in plain sight among the people who showed up for work every day. In emergency services throughout Colorado and beyond, Elena's story had become a reminder that transformative capability often existed within existing personnel, waiting not for new training or equipment, but simply for the moment when organizational vision finally became clear enough to see the extraordinary resources that had been there all along. The transformation was complete, but the impact continued to ripple through emergency services organizations across the country, establishing new standards for talent recognition, personnel utilization, and the systematic integration of diverse capabilities in modern emergency response. Elena Rodriguez had proven that hidden talents, when properly recognized and utilized, could literally save lives and transform organizations, and that the most valuable question any organization could ask was not, "What capabilities do we need to acquire?" but rather, "What remarkable capabilities do we already possess that we simply haven't learned to see?" Fellow firefighters barely noticed her careful preparations. Sergeant Thompson was reviewing building schematics on his tablet, veteran. Firefighter Mike Casey was testing his radio equipment, and Lieutenant Barnes was coordinating with other incoming units through his headset. Elena's fingers traced over her gear with practiced precision as she silently reviewed emergency protocols in her mind, her lips moving slightly as she mentally rehearsed the chemical emergency procedures she'd studied the previous night. But what her colleagues didn't know, what wasn't mentioned in her personnel file or discussed during the shift changes, was that Elena Rodriguez held a master's degree in chemical engineering from Colorado School of Mines and spoke 4 languages fluently. Her father, Carlos Rodriguez, had been a chemical plant supervisor in Guadalajara before the family immigrated when Elena was 12. Her mother, Maria, had insisted on maintaining their Spanish heritage, while Elena excelled academically in her new country. During her undergraduate years at the University of Colorado, Elena had become fascinated with international chemical processing standards, leading her to study French during a summer program in Lyon and Portuguese during a semester abroad in Sao Paulo. Her Arabic language skills had developed during her master's thesis research when she'd worked with an international chemical processing firm that maintained facilities across the Middle East. None of this extensive background had seemed directly relevant when she'd applied to the fire department 18 months earlier. The application process had focused on physical fitness standards, basic educational requirements, and psychological evaluations designed to assess performance under stress. Elena's academic achievements were noted in her file, but in the daily routine of firefighting, maintaining equipment, responding to emergency calls, following established protocols, her linguistic abilities and technical expertise had never emerged as necessary skills. She had cleaned trucks with the same methodical precision she'd once applied to chemical compound analysis. She had maintained equipment with the attention to detail that had earned her academic honors. She had followed orders and tried to prove herself through the physical demands of firefighting, never finding appropriate moments to mention that she could discuss volatile organic compounds in 4 different languages or that she understood industrial chemical processes better than most plant supervisors. Her quiet demeanor and focus on learning standard firefighting procedures had earned respect from her colleagues, but it had also reinforced her invisibility. Elena had learned to listen more than she spoke, to observe before acting, and to demonstrate competence through reliability rather than through showcasing specialized knowledge that might seem presumptuous coming from the department's newest member. ETA 90 seconds. The driver, Captain Rodriguez, no relation, despite the shared surname, called back to the crew. Through the small rear window, Elena could see the massive plume of black and yellow smoke rising like a malevolent tower against the Colorado sky. The ChemCorp facility sprawled across several acres, its maze of pipes, tanks, and processing units now partially obscured by smoke, and the growing collection of emergency response vehicles. The acrid smell of burning chemicals was already penetrating the truck's ventilation system, making even seasoned firefighters reach for their masks. Elena's engineering background immediately recognized the distinctive odor signatures, industrial cleaning solvents mixing with heated organic compounds, creating a toxic cocktail that would require careful navigation and specialized breathing equipment for anyone entering the facility. As Engine 19 screeched to a halt at the improvised command post, Chief Martinez leaped down from the cab, his boots hitting the asphalt with military precision. The scene before him was organized chaos. Fire trucks forming a defensive perimeter around the facility, while hazmat specialists in their distinctive yellow suits moved with urgent purpose between mobile laboratories and decontamination stations. The acrid smell of burning chemicals filled the air, making even seasoned firefighters instinctively check their breathing equipment. "Status report," Martinez demanded as Battalion Chief Williams approached, his clipboard covered with constantly updated information and his radio crackling with reports from multiple teams. Williams had been coordinating multi-agency responses for 15 years. But the complexity of the ChemCorp situation was testing even his extensive experience. "Chief, we've got a cascade failure situation," Williams reported, his voice tight with controlled stress. Initial explosion in Section C triggered secondary reactions in the adjacent processing areas. Unknown mixture of industrial solvents, cleaning compounds, and manufacturing chemicals. The explosion knocked out the emergency ventilation system, and we have confirmed casualties trapped inside the main processing area. Williams gestured toward the facility's eastern wing, where smoke was billowing from multiple breach points. Engineering assessments suggest structural integrity is compromised but not immediately critical. The bigger problem is the chemical exposure risk and the fact that we're dealing with an active reaction scenario. Temperatures are still rising in several areas. Martinez surveyed the scene with the practiced eye of someone who had commanded emergency responses ranging from apartment building fires to highway pileups involving hazardous materials. His experienced gaze took in wind patterns, smoke density, the positioning of his units, and the logistical challenges of coordinating what was clearly going to be a multi-hour operation involving dozens of personnel and specialized equipment. "Casualties?" Martinez asked, though he dreaded the answer. "That's our primary challenge, Chief. We've established preliminary contact with survivors trapped in 3 separate areas of the facility, but we're dealing with a communication breakdown that's hampering rescue coordination." Before Martinez could respond, Dr. Sarah Kim, a hazmat specialist from the Colorado Department of Public Health, jogged over carrying a tablet loaded with preliminary chemical analysis data. Her face shield was fogged with exertion, and her yellow protective suit was already stained with chemical residue samples. "Chief Martinez, we need to brief you on the chemical situation immediately. This isn't just a standard industrial fire. We're dealing with a complex, multi-compound emergency that requires specialized approach protocols." Dr. Kim spread a detailed facility diagram across the hood of a command vehicle, her finger tracing the areas of primary concern. "Based on preliminary analysis, we're dealing with a complex mixture of volatile organic compounds, industrial cleaning agents, and manufacturing chemicals that have been heating and mixing in uncontrolled combinations since the initial explosion." She pointed to specific areas on the diagram, each marked with different colored indicators representing various levels of chemical hazard. "The concern is that some of these chemicals, when combined and heated, are producing toxic gas clouds that are heavier than air. They're settling in low-lying areas and confined spaces, which means standard evacuation routes might actually be more dangerous than remaining in certain elevated positions." The technical complexity of the situation was becoming clearer, and Martinez felt the familiar weight of command responsibility settling on his shoulders. This wasn't a fire that could be fought with water and foam. This was a chemical emergency requiring expertise that extended far beyond traditional firefighting capabilities. "How does this affect victim extraction procedures?" Martinez asked, though he suspected the answer would complicate their operations significantly. Dr. Kim consulted her tablet, scrolling through real-time air quality measurements and chemical interaction analyses. We've identified at least 12 workers trapped in 3 separate areas of the processing facility. But here's the critical challenge. Our initial contact attempts indicate that several of the trapped individuals are non-English speakers, and our standard emergency communication protocols aren't effective for conveying the complex safety instructions necessary for chemical emergency evacuation. The reality hit Martinez like a physical blow to his chest. In standard fire emergencies, communication with trapped victims could be managed through simple, direct instructions. Stay low, move toward the exit, cover your mouth. But chemical emergencies required nuanced understanding of invisible hazards, wind patterns, safe breathing techniques, and evacuation routes that might be counterintuitive to people's natural instincts. "What languages are we dealing with?" Martinez asked, though he suspected the answer would add layers of complexity to an already challenging situation. Dr. Kim consulted her notes, flipping through pages of employment records that had been hastily gathered from ChemCorp's Human Resources Department. Based on employment documentation, the facility employs workers from several countries as part of their international labor program. The trapped individuals appear to include Spanish speakers from Mexico and Central America, at least 2 Arabic speakers from Syria and Iraq, 1 Portuguese speaker from Brazil, and potentially others we haven't identified yet. The demographic information reflected the reality of modern American manufacturing, an international workforce bringing diverse skills to industrial operations, but also creating communication challenges that emergency responders weren't always prepared to handle. Martinez felt his jaw muscles tighten as the implications became clear. The Denver Fire Department had basic translation capabilities for common emergency situations, laminated cards with essential phrases in Spanish, some bilingual officers for community outreach, but nothing approaching the technical fluency needed for complex rescue coordination in a hazardous chemical environment where miscommunication could prove fatal. "Current options?" he asked Battalion Chief Williams, though both men were already mentally reviewing the limited resources available. Williams pulled out his tablet, scrolling through emergency contact protocols that had been designed for standard urban emergencies rather than specialized industrial disasters. "I'm reaching out to the city's professional translation services, but they're estimating 60 to 90 minutes minimum response time for technical translators with chemical industry experience. The police department has some bilingual officers, but none with the specialized knowledge needed for chemical emergency coordination." 60 to 90 minutes? Martinez's voice carried the weight of professional frustration mixed with human concern. "Those people don't have 60 minutes, much less 90. The chemical exposure risks alone could prove fatal within that time frame, and that's not considering potential structural collapse or fire propagation." As if summoned by their conversation, a burst of frantic radio chatter erupted from the communications center that had been established near the command vehicles. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Rodriguez from Rescue Team Alpha, who had managed to establish preliminary contact with some of the trapped workers. "Command, this is Rescue Team Alpha reporting from the Eastern Perimeter Access Point." The voice crackled through static, mixed with the background noise of emergency equipment and shouted coordination between team members. "We've reached the outer edge of the affected area and established voice contact with trapped personnel, but we're encountering significant language barriers that are preventing effective coordination of rescue operations." Martinez grabbed the radio microphone. "Alpha Team, this is Command. What exactly are you encountering out there?" "Sir, we've got multiple voices responding to our calls, but the communication breakdown is severe. We're hearing what sounds like Spanish, Arabic, and possibly other languages we can't identify. The trapped workers seem to be trying to communicate critical information about their locations, injuries, and the conditions in their areas, but without effective translation, we can't coordinate safe evacuation procedures." The radio continued with updates that painted an increasingly urgent picture. Command, these individuals need to understand specific instructions about chemical exposure protection, safe movement routes through areas of varying contamination levels, and timing coordination with our rescue approach. Standard emergency phrase cards aren't sufficient for this level of technical communication. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice grew more strained as he continued. Additionally, sir, the trapped workers appear to have knowledge about facility layout, chemical processes, and alternative exit routes that could be crucial for safe evacuation, but we can't access that information without proper linguistic coordination. Martinez felt sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. The communication failure wasn't just preventing rescue coordination, it was cutting off access to potentially life-saving information that the trapped workers possessed about their own facility and situation. Dr. Kim stepped closer to the radio communication. Chief Martinez, the chemical analysis is showing increasing concentration of toxic compounds in several areas of the facility. If the trapped workers are unable to understand and follow specific safety protocols, or if they make movement decisions based on incomplete information, we could be looking at fatal chemical exposure scenarios. The technical and human elements of the crisis were converging into a perfect storm of urgency. Martinez turned to Battalion Chief Williams with the expression of a man who had spent 30 years solving impossible problems and now faced one that seemed to exceed his department's capabilities. Williams, I need immediate solutions. What are our options for emergency translation services? Williams consulted his tablet again, scrolling through contact lists and emergency protocols. Chief, I've contacted the University of Colorado's language department, but their faculty are in classes and wouldn't be available for field work. The hospital has some multilingual staff, but they're not trained for emergency response operations. The International Business Council has interpreters, but none with technical chemical background. The limitations of their resources were becoming starkly apparent. Translation services that worked perfectly for medical emergencies or legal proceedings weren't designed for the specialized requirements of chemical emergency response, where technical precision could mean the difference between life and death. Martinez's radio crackled again with updates from the scene. Command, this is Rescue Team Beta. We've identified a secondary group of trapped workers in the Western Processing Area. Initial voice contact suggests they may be attempting to reach what they believe are safer areas, but without communication, we can't verify if their instincts about safe zones are accurate given the chemical contamination patterns. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Trapped workers were making decisions about their safety based on their knowledge of the facility under normal circumstances. But a chemical emergency had transformed the building into an environment where familiar areas might be deadly and safe zones might be counterintuitive. Doctor. Kim interrupted with another crucial update. Chief, our air quality monitoring is showing that some areas the workers might naturally retreat to, like enclosed break rooms and interior offices, are actually accumulating higher concentrations of toxic gases due to ventilation system failure. We need to redirect them toward areas that might feel more dangerous, but are actually safer from a chemical exposure standpoint. The irony was brutal. The trapped workers' survival might depend on following instructions that contradicted their natural instincts, but those instructions couldn't be communicated effectively due to language barriers. Martinez felt the familiar weight of command responsibility, but this crisis was presenting challenges beyond anything in his 3 decades of experience. He had managed multi-alarm fires involving dozens of units, coordinated rescues from collapsed buildings, and directed emergency responses to highway accidents involving hazardous materials. But he had never faced a situation where the technical complexity of the emergency intersected so critically with communication barriers. All units, this is command, Martinez announced through his radio. We need immediate identification of any personnel with multilingual capabilities, particularly Spanish, Arabic, or Portuguese. Any team members with chemical industry experience or technical translation background should report to the command post immediately. The radio remained silent for several long seconds before responses began filtering in. Engine 12 reports negative on multilingual personnel. Rescue Team Delta has one team member with basic Spanish but no technical background. Hazmat Unit 7 reports no foreign language capabilities. The responses painted a picture of a department that, despite its professional competence and dedication, lacked the specialized linguistic resources needed for the current emergency. Martinez realized he was facing a fundamental limitation in modern emergency services: the assumption that English language capability would be sufficient for most crisis situations. Behind the command vehicles and away from the urgent radio chatter, the firefighters of Station 19 had been assembling for duty assignments. Elena Rodriguez stood quietly with her crew, listening to the fragments of information that filtered through radio communications and hurried conversations between supervisors. Her engineering background allowed her to understand the technical references to chemical compounds and facility systems, while her linguistic training helped her pick up the scattered foreign language phrases that occasionally emerged from radio static. As she listened to the developing crisis, Elena felt a familiar internal tension, the same sensation she'd experienced during her 8 months with the department whenever her hidden qualifications seemed relevant to emergency situations. Her chemical engineering education had given her detailed knowledge of industrial facility layouts, chemical interaction principles, and emergency evacuation protocols for hazardous environments. Her linguistic abilities allowed her to understand the multilingual nature of modern American workplaces and the communication challenges that could arise during emergencies. But Elena had learned to remain silent during emergency briefings, to follow orders rather than volunteer suggestions, and to demonstrate competence through reliability rather than through showcasing specialized knowledge. 8 months of rookie status had reinforced the importance of staying within assigned roles and avoiding any appearance of presumption or overreach. Her fingers unconsciously moved to the small notebook she kept in her gear pocket, filled with technical notes, chemical reference information, and language practice exercises that she reviewed during quiet moments at the station. The notebook represented the intersection of her academic background and professional duties, but it remained as invisible as her other qualifications. Sergeant Thompson's voice cut through her thoughts as he distributed assignment information to the Station 19 crew. Rodriguez, you're assigned to equipment coordination and supply logistics. Monitor radio communications for resource requests, and maintain inventory of emergency supplies for team rotation. The assignment was standard for rookie firefighters, essential support functions that kept the operation running smoothly, while more experienced personnel handled direct rescue operations. Elena had expected this type of assignment, but knowing that her specialized knowledge might be directly relevant to the communication crisis made the peripheral role particularly frustrating. "Yes, sir," Elena responded, adjusting her helmet and moving toward the equipment trucks where she would spend the emergency managing inventory rather than contributing to the complex technical and linguistic challenges that were hampering rescue efforts. As Elena organized oxygen tanks, emergency medical supplies, and specialized chemical protection equipment, she continued monitoring radio communications that painted an increasingly desperate picture. The rescue teams were encountering not just language barriers, but technical communication challenges that required understanding of chemical processes, facility systems, and industrial safety protocols. "Command, this is Team Alpha," crackled through her radio. "The trapped workers are trying to communicate information about ventilation systems and chemical storage areas, but we're unable to understand the technical details they're providing. This information could be critical for safe evacuation route planning." Elena's hands stilled on the equipment she was organizing. Her engineering background immediately recognized the importance of the information the workers were trying to convey: knowledge about facility systems that could determine safe routes through the chemically contaminated building. Another radio update followed. "Command, this is Team Beta. We're hearing discussions among the trapped workers that seem to involve knowledge about chemical processes and facility layout. But without translation capability, we can't access this potentially life-saving information." Elena felt her heart rate increase as she realized the full scope of the crisis. This wasn't just about language translation, it was about technical communication that required understanding of both linguistic and chemical engineering principles. The trapped workers possessed expertise about their facility that could guide rescue operations, but that expertise was inaccessible due to communication barriers. Dr. Kim's voice joined the radio communications. All teams be advised that our chemical analysis is indicating changing conditions within the facility. Temperature and pressure variations are creating evolving contamination patterns. Any information the trapped workers can provide about internal facility conditions could be crucial for updating our safety protocols. Elena's engineering training immediately understood the implications of Dr. Kim's update. Industrial chemical emergencies created dynamic situations where initial safety assessments might become obsolete as conditions evolved. The trapped workers' real-time observations could provide critical data for rescue coordination if that information could be effectively communicated and interpreted. The radio continued with increasingly urgent updates. Command! The trapped workers appear to be discussing alternative exit routes and areas of the facility that might be safer or more dangerous, but we can't understand the details of their assessment. Without this information, we're operating blind regarding optimal evacuation strategies. Elena's internal debate reached a critical point. For 8 months, she had carefully maintained separation between her professional duties as a firefighter and her academic qualifications in chemical engineering and linguistics. She had learned that unsolicited suggestions from rookie personnel were rarely welcomed, and that specialized knowledge could be perceived as presumptuous rather than helpful. But the radio communications were painting a picture of rescue operations hampered by exactly the combination of technical and linguistic barriers she was uniquely qualified to address. Her chemical engineering background would allow her to understand and interpret technical information from the trapped workers. Her linguistic abilities would enable direct communication in the languages that were creating barriers for other rescue personnel. Elena looked toward the command post where Chief Martinez was surrounded by senior personnel, all focused on the crisis but lacking the specific expertise needed to bridge the communication gap that was hampering rescue efforts. She thought about the trapped workers, people who might be fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, struggling to communicate life-saving information to rescuers who couldn't understand them. The weight of decision pressed upon her shoulders. She could continue following orders, maintaining her peripheral role, and avoiding any risk of being seen as overstepping her authority. Or she could step forward with information that might literally save lives, despite the professional and personal risks involved. Elena's hands moved to her radio, then hesitated. 8 months of learning departmental hierarchy and protocol warred with her engineering training and human compassion. The moment stretched out as emergency vehicles continued arriving, rescue teams continued reporting communication failures, and Chief Martinez continued searching for solutions that Elena already possessed. Taking a deep breath that felt like stepping off a cliff, Elena made her decision. She secured the equipment she'd been organizing, straightened her shoulders, and walked toward the command post where Chief Martinez was coordinating the increasingly complex rescue operation. Each step felt simultaneously natural and terrifying. Natural because her education and skills were directly relevant to the crisis. Terrifying because she was about to reveal qualifications that would fundamentally change how her colleagues viewed her, if they believed her at all. The command post was a hub of controlled urgency, with Chief Martinez at the center of multiple conversations involving rescue coordination, chemical analysis, and resource allocation. Dr. Kim was updating facility diagrams based on air quality measurements. Battalion Chief Williams was coordinating with incoming specialized units, and various team leaders were reporting status updates through radio communications. Elena approached the edge of the command circle, her heart hammering against her ribs but her resolve strengthening with each radio update that highlighted the communication crisis. She waited for a brief pause in the urgent conversations before speaking. "Chief Martinez," Elena said, her voice steady despite her nervousness, "I need to speak with you about the communication barriers your teams are encountering." Martinez looked up from the facility diagrams he'd been studying, his expression shifting from concentration to mild irritation at the interruption. Around the command post, conversations quieted as senior personnel turned to see who was interrupting their crisis coordination. "Rodriguez, you should be coordinating equipment supplies," Martinez said curtly, his tone suggesting this wasn't the time for input from junior personnel. "We're dealing with a complex emergency situation here." Elena felt the familiar surge of anxiety that came with challenging authority, but the urgency of the situation overrode her inclination toward deference. "Sir, I speak Spanish, Arabic, and Portuguese fluently, and I have a master's degree in chemical engineering with specialized training in industrial emergency response." The command post fell silent. Chief Martinez stared at Elena as if she had suddenly transformed into someone he'd never seen before. Dr. Kim's eyebrows shot up in surprise, and her tablet nearly slipped from her hands. Battalion Chief Williams looked between Elena and Martinez with an expression of confusion mixed with dawning interest. "What did you just say?" Martinez asked, his voice careful and measured, as if he wanted to ensure he'd heard correctly. Elena straightened her shoulders, her months of quiet observation ending in this moment of professional necessity. "I said I speak Spanish, Arabic, and Portuguese fluently, Chief. I also have a master's degree in chemical engineering from Colorado School of Mines, with specialized coursework in industrial process safety, hazardous materials handling, and emergency evacuation protocol design for chemical facilities." The information hit the command post like a minor explosion. Dr. Kim recovered first, studying Elena with the intense interest of a scientist encountering an unexpected variable. "Elena, can I call you Elena? You have chemical engineering background with industrial emergency specialization?" "Yes, ma'am. I completed my master's thesis on cross-cultural safety communication in international chemical processing facilities. My research focused on developing emergency response protocols for multilingual work environments, specifically addressing the communication challenges that can arise when technical safety information needs to be conveyed across language barriers." Elena's confidence grew as she explained her background, her professional identity emerging from months of concealment. "I've worked as an intern and consultant with chemical facilities similar to ChemCorp, and I understand the facility systems, chemical processes, and evacuation procedures involved in industrial emergency response." Dr. Kim set down her tablet and gave Elena her full attention. "Your thesis research specifically addressed multilingual communication in chemical emergencies?" "Yes, ma'am. I studied cases where communication barriers had contributed to industrial accidents, and I developed protocols for technical translation that maintain precision while being comprehensible to workers without engineering backgrounds. I also analyzed how cultural differences in authority structures and emergency response could affect worker behavior during crisis situations." Chief Martinez felt his understanding of his rookie firefighter undergoing a fundamental revision. The quiet, reliable Elena Rodriguez, who had cleaned equipment and followed orders for 8 months, was revealing qualifications that exceeded those of most industrial emergency consultants. "Rodriguez," Martinez said, his tone shifting from dismissive to cautiously hopeful, "why is this the first time you're mentioning these qualifications? Your personnel file shows educational background, but nothing about specialized language abilities or advanced chemical engineering training." Elena met his gaze directly, her voice steady but carrying an undertone of explanation that didn't quite rise to defensiveness. "Sir, when I applied to the fire department, I focused on the qualifications that seemed most relevant to firefighting duties. My additional background didn't appear directly applicable to standard emergency response, and I've spent the past 8 months focused on learning departmental procedures and proving my competence in basic firefighting operations." The radio interrupted their conversation with increasing urgency. "Command, this is Team Alpha. We're getting increasingly agitated responses from the trapped workers. They seem to be trying to convey critical information about changing conditions in their area, but the communication barrier is preventing us from understanding their assessments. We need linguistic support immediately." Martinez looked at Elena, then at Dr. Kim, then back at Elena. The hierarchy that had seemed so important minutes earlier was suddenly secondary to the immediate need for exactly the combination of skills Elena possessed. "Rodriguez," Martinez said, his voice carrying the weight of a commander making a crucial decision. "Can you help us establish effective communication with these trapped workers? We need to understand their exact locations, their physical conditions, the facility conditions they're observing, and most importantly, we need to coordinate safe evacuation procedures that take into account both their knowledge of the facility and our knowledge of current chemical hazard conditions." Elena nodded without hesitation. "Yes, sir. I can establish technical communication in Spanish and Arabic, and I can explain complex chemical safety procedures in terms that workers can understand and follow, even under stress conditions. I can also help interpret their facility knowledge in terms that will be useful for rescue coordination." Dr. Kim stepped closer, her scientific interest clearly piqued. "Elena, based on what we know about the chemical processes that were occurring when the explosion happened, what's your assessment of the facility areas where the workers are most likely trapped?" Elena moved to the facility diagram spread across the command vehicle's hood, her engineering training immediately evident as she studied the technical drawings with professional competence. Her finger traced over the facility layout, while her mind integrated the chemical process information with structural and safety considerations. Based on the explosion location and the chemical compounds Dr. Kim mentioned earlier, the trapped workers are most likely in areas adjacent to the primary processing zones, Elena explained, pointing to specific sections of the diagram. These areas would have been affected by the explosion but might have remained structurally sound enough to provide temporary shelter. She continued her analysis, her voice taking on the confidence of someone operating within her area of expertise. "The critical issue is that these areas are designed for normal industrial operations, not for emergency shelter during chemical releases. The ventilation systems that normally make these spaces safe could actually be concentrating toxic compounds if the emergency ventilation protocols failed during the explosion." Chief Martinez watched in amazement as Elena transformed from a quiet rookie into a confident technical expert, her analysis precise and her recommendations grounded in both theoretical knowledge and practical understanding of industrial chemical operations. "The most dangerous assumption," Elena continued, "would be that workers can retreat to areas that feel safest under normal circumstances. In a chemical emergency, indoor spaces that normally provide comfort, like break rooms, offices, and equipment storage areas, can actually become gas concentration points if the ventilation systems aren't functioning properly." Dr. Kim nodded approvingly, recognizing the accuracy of Elena's assessment. "That aligns exactly with our air quality measurements. Elena, what would you recommend for evacuation route prioritization?" Elena studied the facility diagram while integrating information from the radio updates about trapped worker locations. The optimal evacuation routes would prioritize outdoor access points on the eastern and southern sides of the facility, where prevailing winds would disperse chemical concentrations most effectively. But the critical factor is coordinating worker movement with rescue team positioning so that evacuation occurs through areas where we can provide immediate chemical decontamination and medical assessment. She paused, then added a crucial consideration. The trapped workers probably have real-time information about conditions inside the facility that could be more current than our external assessments. If we can establish technical communication, they could guide us toward the most effective rescue approaches while we guide them toward the safest evacuation procedures. Martinez felt a surge of professional relief mixed with personal embarrassment. The solution to their communication crisis had been standing quietly among his personnel for 8 months, but organizational assumptions and hierarchical thinking had prevented him from recognizing resources that were literally right in front of him. "Rodriguez," Martinez said, his voice carrying both authority and newfound respect, "I'm authorizing you to take the lead on victim communication and technical coordination. You'll work directly with Dr. Kim on chemical safety assessment while maintaining direct communication with the trapped workers." He handed Elena his primary radio, a gesture that represented more than the transfer of communication equipment. It was a recognition of expertise that transcended rank and a commitment to utilizing the best available resources, regardless of their source. Elena took the radio, her fingers closing around it with steady confidence. "Thank you, Chief. I'll establish communication immediately and begin coordinating integrated rescue procedures." She switched to the emergency frequency that rescue teams were using for victim contact, then took a deep breath and spoke in clear, professional Spanish. "Attention ChemCorp workers. This is Elena Rodriguez with the Denver Fire Department. I'm a chemical engineer and firefighter, and I'm here to coordinate your safe evacuation. Can anyone hear me clearly?" The response was immediate and filled with relief. A male voice, strained but coherent, replied in rapid Spanish. "Thank God, someone who understands us. My name is Carlos Mendez. I'm a shift supervisor in Section C. We have 12 people in 2 different areas. Some are injured, but most can walk. We're afraid to move because we don't know which areas are safe." Elena's heart raced as she finally established the communication link that had been desperately needed. "Carlos, I need you to stay calm and help me understand your exact situation. I'm going to guide you through the safest evacuation procedures, but I need detailed information about your group and your current conditions." As Elena began the complex process of coordinating the rescue through multilingual technical communication, Chief Martinez watched with a mixture of amazement and professional recalibration. The rookie firefighter he had dismissed earlier was now the central figure in the entire rescue operation, seamlessly integrating linguistic ability with technical expertise to solve problems that had seemed insurmountable just minutes earlier. "Doctor." Kim moved closer to Martinez, her voice low but clearly impressed. "Chief, Elena's combination of linguistic ability and chemical engineering knowledge is solving problems that would have been difficult even with separate translation and technical resources. Her background is exactly what this situation requires." Elena continued her radio communication, switching fluidly between Spanish and English as she gathered critical information from the trapped workers while updating rescue teams on coordination requirements. Her questions demonstrated both linguistic competence and technical understanding, eliciting information that professional translators without chemical background wouldn't have known to request. "Carlos, I need you to describe the ventilation conditions in your area," Elena said in Spanish. "Are you feeling any unusual airflow, detecting any strong chemical odors, or noticing any changes in air quality since the explosion?" The response provided exactly the kind of real-time facility assessment that rescue teams needed. "Elena, the main ventilation system stopped working after the explosion, but there's still some air movement through the emergency vents. We can smell chemical fumes, but they seem lighter near the eastern windows. The western side of our area smells much stronger, almost choking." Elena immediately translated and interpreted this information for Dr. Kim and the rescue teams. "The trapped workers are confirming that emergency ventilation is providing some air circulation, and their observations about odor concentration support our wind pattern analysis. They should move toward eastern areas of their location while avoiding western exposure." She switched back to Spanish to provide specific guidance to Carlos. "Carlos, I need your group to move toward the eastern side of your area and stay close to any windows or external air sources. Avoid the western areas where you're detecting stronger fumes. but don't attempt to leave your current area until our rescue teams are positioned to guide you through safe evacuation routes. The complex coordination continued as Elena established communication with the second group of trapped workers, who included Arabic speakers from Syria and Iraq. Her linguistic transition was seamless as she switched from Spanish to Arabic, introducing herself and beginning the process of gathering location and condition information. "Peace be upon you, this is Elena Rodriguez with the Denver Fire Department," Elena said in formal Arabic. "I am here to help coordinate your safe evacuation. Can you understand me clearly?" The response came from a man whose voice carried both relief and surprise. "Peace be upon you as well. I am Ahmed Hassan, maintenance supervisor. We have 4 people in the maintenance section. Your Arabic is very good. Where did you learn our language?" Elena smiled briefly despite the tension of the situation. "I studied at university and worked with international companies. Ahmed, right now we need to focus on getting you and your colleagues to safety. Can you describe your current location and the conditions you're experiencing?" As Elena continued coordinating with multiple groups in different languages, Chief Martinez found himself witnessing a masterclass in crisis communication. Elena wasn't simply translating words between languages. She was bridging technical concepts, cultural communication styles, and emergency procedures in ways that would have been impossible for standard translation services. Her